The 9th Combat Team, beginning at H+1 on W Day, was to land on Blue Beach, overrun and destroy all hostile resistance, seize O1 within its zone of action, and be prepared for advance and seizure of further objectives on division order. Contact was to be maintained with the 21st Combat Team on the left. It was also charged with protection of the division's right or west flank. The 21st Combat Team at the same time was to land on Green Beach, overcome enemy resistance, seize O1 and be prepared for further advance and seizure of objectives on order. Contact was to be maintained with the 3rd Combat Team on the left. On continuation of the attack from O1, one landing team of the 21st Combat Team was to be designated as Division Reserve. When O2 had been seized, an advance element of the combat team was to move on Mount Tenyo as rapidly as possible, disregarding phase lines. After seizure of O3, it was to seize further objectives up to and including Mount Tenyo as fast as terrain, enemy resistance, and the maintenance of contact would permit. At all times, it was to protect the division's left flank within its zone of action. The 3rd Combat Team at the same time was to land on beaches Red 1 and Red 2, seize its initial objective after overcoming hostile resistance, and be prepared for further operations on order. It was to be prepared to organize O3 for defense immediately upon its capture. This group was also responsible for protection of the northern sector of the division's left flank. When the landing waves were about 1,000 yards from shore, the beaches were brought under direct fire from rockets delivered from LCI gunboats. As the distance to shore was closed to about 300 yards, naval gunfire was lifted to the rear and shifted to the flanks of the beach area. Attack aviation took over direct control of the beach, strafing enemy positions and immediate support areas until our troops were actually ashore. Simultaneous landings were carried out successfully on all assigned beaches. The 3rd Marine Division landed on Red Beaches 1 and 2, Blue Beach and Green Beach against light opposition. The 1st Provisional Marine Brigade, plus the 305th Regiment, U.S. Army, went ashore on Yellow and White Beaches, encountering a small enemy force, which withdrew after slight resistance. By evening of W Day, all troops, tanks, and artillery had been landed approximately as scheduled. By 0900 of W+1, the brigade was driving to the north and toward Mount Alafan, which was providing the Japs with good artillery observation. On the other beachhead sector, the 3rd Division's attack was meeting increasing resistance on all flanks. In the early afternoon, elements of the 9th Marines landed without opposition on Cabras Island. The next morning, W+2, 23 July, the 3rd Marines attacked and secured the ground commanding Red Beaches, holding this position against a Japanese counterattack, which developed later the next day. In the meantime, the brigade continued to extend its perimeter, meeting light opposition in all zones except that held by the 22nd Marines to the north, where strong artillery and machine gun fire permitted only slight gains. According to order, the Corps Reserve, consisting of the 77th Division, United States Army, less the 307th Regiment, which had landed on W Day with the brigade, commenced landing. The weather on the morning of 25 July, W+4, was marked by considerable shower activity. On the northern flank of its sector, the 3rd Division resumed attack over rugged terrain against the stubborn resistance of the enemy, who was emplaced in strong ground defense and in the face of cliffs. Other units made small advances along the front and maintained vigorous patrol action. One patrol, advancing as far as Cascaso Hill, 2 miles south, found abandoned Jap positions stocked with supplies sufficient for a regiment. In the brigade sector, the 22nd Marines, supported by naval gunfire, artillery and tanks, had resumed an attack on its northern flank. Their advance was retarded, however, by well-organized defenses, including artillery and mortar fire from cliffs. All units of Corps artillery had by this time completed landing. Japanese troops, driven from the south side of Orote Peninsula, counterattacked west of Abo. The 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, then moved into position along Old Agat Road to block the enemy escape route from the peninsula. Another battalion of the 4th Marines organized the high ground south of Atantanto and established contact with the 77th Division. The 77th Division, in the meantime, had assumed command of the 1st Brigade sector and that portion of the 4th beachhead line which it contained. By the end of the 5th day, our lines were disposed like this. On the morning of W+5, the 3rd Division attacked, meeting stiff resistance on its eastern flank, but making progress along the rest of its line. That same morning, the brigade, resuming its attack, met extremely heavy opposition on its left flank and overran many caves and well-dug-in positions in the face of fire from small arms, mortars, light and heavy anti-aircraft guns, and artillery. By daylight, however, it was discovered that enemy forces of considerable strength had infiltrated the beachhead, and all units of the division, including Pioneers and Headquarters Battalion, began clearing them out. Many hundreds of Japs were killed in the mopping up within our lines, which by the end of W+6 were still intact. The 3rd Division resumed its attack, meeting strong resistance on the center and again on the left flank. Because many enemy positions were defilated, artillery was of little value, and strong points had to be slowly reduced by frontal assaults. Below here in the brigade sector, this same morning, the attack on Orote Peninsula was resumed. The 4th Marines, advancing rapidly toward the airfield, were stopped and held against well-prepared enemy defenses delivering their fire from high ground. Meanwhile, on the right flank, the 22nd Marines failed to coordinate its attack by 1 hour due to pressure from Jap artillery. Underway, its advance was delayed by impenetrable mangrove swamps, which caused it to divert its attack to this vicinity. On W+8, the 3rd Division was still feeling heavy enemy resistance on its left, but only scattered pocket opposition was encountered along the rest of the line of advance. The 4th beachhead line in this zone of action was taken, securing a beachhead from which to advance the attack, relatively free from Jap observation. Also, the occupation of high ground on Mount Chichao and Mount Alutam, as well as the attainment of Mount Tenyo by the 77th Division, which would enable us to observe the enemy north and east of our own lines. On Orote Peninsula, the 1st Brigade, supported by air and artillery, was continuing to advance against heavy opposition. The firefight was carried to the Sumai Road, on the north side of which, in the vicinity of the old Marine Corps barracks, the Japs had prepared positions. In the late afternoon, the enemy forces broke and ran. Advancing rapidly, the 22nd Marines occupied these positions for the night, and the next morning, W+9 continued the attack against heavy resistance, supported by M10 tank destroyers and the 77th Division. By the end of W+9, 29 July, after 10 days of hard fighting, the first phase of the Guam operation had been successfully concluded. Our total casualties for this period were 5,944, with 954 killed in action, as against 5,482 known enemy dead, plus 48 captured. The capture of Orote Peninsula ended all organized resistance within our beachhead and placed in our hands an airfield which would soon be operational for light planes. It also delivered to us Apra Harbor, whose facilities would greatly expedite the unloading of supplies and equipment, as well as provide a suitable area for a seaplane base. The second phase of the Guam operation was ready to start. Batteries from Corps Artillery laid down heavy interdiction and harassing fire on the enemy supply and bivouac area. Regiments of the 3rd Marine Division, together with those of the 77th Army Division, advanced rapidly toward the eastern side of the island, thus establishing a line across Guam which cut off any communication between enemy forces north and south. The 1st Provisional Marine Brigade, with the 305th Regimental Combat Team, took over the defense sector and continued mopping up operations in this area. Occupation of the largest and capital city, Agana, was concluded against scattered resistance. On 1 August, W+11, the 3rd Marine Division on the left flank and the 77th Army Division on the right, the line of action turned and moved toward the large concentration of enemy forces in the northern portion of the island. With the sea on 3 sides, and with our front lines continually moving up, the enemy escape corridor was kept sealed. Continued steadily northward, driving the Japanese back into compressed pockets at the tip of the island. On the 2nd and 3rd day of the advance, the town of Barrigada and the heights above the town, in the center of the line of action, were occupied. The Tayan airfield was captured, and preparations were made to put it into operational use as soon as possible. The advance northward was supported by naval gunfire from Task Force 53, as well as by airstrikes from carrier-based planes and missions flown from airfields previously secured on Saipan. Early during this drive, contact was lost between the left flank of the 77th Division and the right flank of the 3rd Division, which had to reinforce the contingent portion of the line several times. After 4 days, however, contact was re-established. By this time, the 9th Defense Battalion, reinforced, was constituted as a task unit and assigned to patrol the whole southern half of the island, relieving the 1st Brigade, which went into Corps Reserve. Action in the southern sector was limited throughout the remainder of the operation to flushing individual snipers, stragglers, and disorganized enemy groups, as the Japanese plan had called for evacuation of this area in favor of a strong defense of the northern part of Guam. The 3rd Division's left, with the 3rd Marines in assault, advanced rapidly over fairly open terrain, meeting no enemy forces. In the center of this sector, however, strong opposition developed against the 21st Marines, which ran into organized Japanese strongpoints presenting direct fire from emplaced artillery weapons. The right flank, held by the 9th Marines, forcing its way through dense undergrowth, was opposed by the enemy in moderate strength. On 6 August, W+16, the left flank of the 3rd Division sector was relieved by the 1st Brigade, which had moved up from the Corps Reserve area. Their part of the advance was slowed for a while by roadblocks and anti-tank fire. The forward movement, however, was maintained by all units along the line of action. While the opposition was comparatively light, the terrain became more difficult in all sectors. Bulldozers were required to clear the road and forced passage through the dwarf jungle growth. The airfield on Orote Peninsula having been rendered fully operative, and soon after that the one at Agana, support was offered by airstrikes against roads, road junctions, and buildings. Corps artillery maintained interdiction, harassing, and counter-battery fire on all suspected enemy artillery positions and all observed installations and concentration areas. Destructive fire was placed on warehouses, fuel dumps, water systems, and trucks. Enemy bivouac areas were neutralized, and special attention was paid to the escape routes from Yigo, Mount Santa Rosa area in the eastern sector, where the 77th Division was continuing its advance against moderate resistance. Despite heavy rains and scattered showers on the 9th day of this action, the attack continued up island, meeting only local opposition, the most force being against the 3rd Division sector. The brigade, through aggressive patrol action, attained the northwest tip of the island, running its line through Mount Macanao and the cliffs of Mount Ritadian, overlooking the sea. In continuing bad weather, the attack was marked by vigorous patrol action in all sectors. Liquidation of resistance continued with the mopping up of small, isolated, disorganized enemy groups, which were wandering aimlessly among the lines. Destruction of Japanese snipers and stragglers by our combat patrols continued, with special attention to the numerous caves in the vicinity of Yigo. Although mopping up action was still underway, particularly in the southern half of the island, by W+20, 10 August, the northern half of the island was secured, and all organized resistance on Guam was considered at an end.